And now we have with us Sheikh Abderrazak, who you all know. He has been with us in the past conferences, and I'm grateful to him that he was able to join us this year despite his busy schedule. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him for making the trip all the way to the island and accept from him and from all of us. تفضل شيخ.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا والصلاة والسلام على من أرسله الله عز وجل شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Dear respected brothers and sisters, as you know, the topic of this conference is da'wah. And that is to call people to Allah Azza wa Jal, to preach to Allah Azza wa Jal. And da'wah usually is to invite people to Allah Azza wa Jal. And in this regard, the word communication is a key word, because you have to communicate with people. And based on that, I'm going to take Surah Al-Kahf and reflect or share with you some reflections on Surah Al-Kahf. Because interestingly enough, in this surah, there are 3 words that refer to communication. 3 of them, but different types of communication. Subhanallah. So the first word is al-hiwar or al-muhawara. That means conversation or discussion. And this is narrated in the story. There's a story in Surah Al-Kahf about 2 men. One of them was extremely wealthy, to the point that he became arrogant and then ungrateful to Allah Azza wa Jal, and then he lost his path. Now, his friend, he was a good friend of him, tried to bring him back, to orient him to the right path. So Allah Ta'ala narrates to us and tells us, قَالَ لَهُ صَاحِبُهُ وَهُوَ يُحَاوِرُهُ. So his friend told him while having a discussion, like a friendly discussion, a conversation. Look at this type of communication. So now first he tells him, قال له صاحبه وهو يحاوره أكفرت بالذي خلقك من تراب ثم من نطفة ثم سواك رجلا. Are you ungrateful? Of course, the word akafarta has 2 meanings. There's one meaning that kafara, it means to disbelieve. But also kafara, the root word, it means to be ungrateful. And that's what Allah Ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Nahl. And Surah Al-Nahl, by the way, is called the Surah of Ni'am, the bounties. And in this Surah, Allah Ta'ala says, أَفَبِنِعْمَةِ اللَّهِ هُمْ يَكْفُرُونَ. Are they ungrateful about the blessings of Allah Azza wa Jal? And the same word comes with يَجْحَدُونَ. Are they ungrateful? Because it's the same meaning of to be ungrateful in Surah Al-Nahl. So his friend told him, are you ungrateful to the one who created you from soil, then from a drop of water, then made you a man? So by saying to him first, he created you from soil, he is referring to our grandfather Adam, who was created from turab. It means the turab that you step on to walk. You put it under your shoe. So the turab is something that very humble, very modest. So he's telling him, look, you're created from turab. You should be modest. Don't boost yourself too much. And then he said, and then from a drop of water. That's where in the womb of your mother. You were very weak and humiliated. And then he made you a man. Now, the second part of communication with his friend, now he's gonna tell him what he should do. لولا إذ دخلت جنتك قلت ما شاء الله لا قوة إلا بالله. When you enter your farms, your gardens, your wealth, then say whatever Allah wills. This is all from Allah and I have no power. It's all by Allah's blessing that I have all this. And then he added something. إن ترني أنا أقل منك مالا وولدا. Is it because you see me as someone who has less wealth than you? That's your perspective. That's how you see me. but I have more blessings. Just to be grateful to Allah that overwhelms and overpowers all what you have, because I didn't deny Him. So this is the first word, which is al-hiwar or al-muhawara. Another word comes in the same surah, which is different types of communication, which is al-jidal. And Allah says, وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. That man is the species that argues the most. Arguing too much. Now, when you say arguing al-jidal, it's not always bad. There are two types of arguing. Jidal can be positive or can be negative. Now, what is the negative jidal? The negative arguing. The same surah, in Surah Al-Kahf, Allah Ta'ala tells us, وَيُجَادِلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِالْبَاطِلِ لِيُدَحِضُوا بِهِ الْحَقِّ. That those who disbelieve, they argue with al-batil, with falsehood, to nullify the truth. So when you argue with falsehood to nullify the truth, that's a jidal that is not allowed. Another jidal that is not allowed is in Hajj. Allah Ta'ala tells us, فَمَنْ فَرَضَ فِيهِنَّ الْحَجَّ فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ. When you go to make Hajj, no sexual intercourse between spouses, no type of sin whatever, and no jidal. Even if you are right, don't go into jidal with somebody and lose your Hajj, because chances are you do it once in your life. You don't want to go into jidal. Subhanallah. Another type of jidal, or this type of communication that is not allowed, Allah Ta'ala tells us, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ وَلَا هُدًى وَلَا كِتَابٍ مُنِيرٍ. Some people, they argue about Allah without knowledge, without guidance, and without an enlightening book. Subhanallah. So when you argue, you have to argue with knowledge, with guidance, and with an enlightening book. Now, if you look at the reverse psychology, it means that the positive arguing is when you argue with those things. When you have guidance, you have knowledge, and you argue with it. And when you argue, Allah Ta'ala tells His Messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Even when you argue, it has to be with the best manner. And Allah tells us also, وَلَا تُجَادِلُوا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Don't argue with the people of the book except with that which is better. It means if you have two ways to argue, choose the best one. Subhanallah. So this is arguing, this is al-jidal. Now the third word is mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf again, which is al-mira'. And that's another type of communication which involves arguing, but al-mira', the difference is that the mira' is usually when you argue with something regarding the unseen, al-ghayb, that only Allah Azza wa Jal knows. And that's why Allah Ta'ala, when He narrates to us the people of the story of the people or the companions of the cave, and He said that people argue how many there were. Some say there were 3, others say there were 5, some say it was 7, right? And Allah Ta'ala says, ما يعلمهم إلا قليل, right? So, قُلْ رَبِّي أَعْلَمُ بِعِدَّتِهِمْ. Allah knows best how many there were. فَلَا تُمَارِ فِيهِمْ إِلَّا مِرَاءً ظَاهِرًا. So don't go into arguing, disputing with them in their numbers, except with an obvious arguing. Like what? For example, we know for sure there were less than 10. This is something, because when you read the Quran, Allah tells us, إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ. You know, in Arabic we have it's very special, because in English you say you have singular plural. In Arab you have singular plural, and you have a plural of a small number. جَمْعُ قِلَّة. It means between 3 and 10. And one of the forms of جَمْعُ قِلَّة is فِعْلَة, like fitya. It means there were less than 10. Like nisa, niswa. Small number. So for sure we know that there was less than 10, right? And then when Allah says, for example, there were 3 or 5, He says, رَجْمًا بِالْغَيْبِ. It's like guessing in the darkness. Just speculating. But when He says 7, Allah Ta'ala didn't say anything about it. So when you argue of those things, don't argue about things about al-ghayb. Now, these 3 words that I mentioned, al-hiwar, and al-jidal and al-mira', these are 3 types. There's another type that is mentioned but not explicitly in the Quran, implicitly, which is al-muhajajah. And the muhajajah, it comes from the word hujjah, which means huge or great proof. Allah calls it Hujjah, Sultan, Burhan. These three words, it means strong proof. And Allah mentioned it in Surah Al-Kahf, but not explicitly, when the people of the cave stood to their people and they said, هؤلاء قوم اتخذوا من دونه آلهة لولا يأتون عليهم بسلطان بين. Why do they worship other than Allah? Just provide us with a strong sultan proof. And usually, subhanAllah, it's interesting, but the word hujjah, it always comes with Ibrahim alayhi salam throughout the Quran. Because Allah says, وَتِلْكَ حُجَّتُنَا آتَيْنَاهَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ عَلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ. We have given Ibrahim a strong proof of evidence, because the difference between this type of arguing is that you have strong proof using reasoning. And you notice that in the story of Ibrahim with people who were worshipping like the planets and then the moon and then the sun, or when Ibrahim alayhi salam argues with the king and the king told him, who is your Lord? He said, my Lord gives life and take life. He said, I can do that. So he brought two prisoners. He said, kill this one, set this one free. And they told him, see, I give life and take life. Of course, this is not what it meant. The one that you killed, you have to bring him back to life. That's what it means. But Ibrahim, and this is also a lesson in terms of communication, didn't stop at this point. He didn't want to argue with him. He just, okay, I'll accept that. My Lord brings the sun from the east. Can you bring it from the west? فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ. So the king was abashed, astonished with this strong proof. Now, if we recapitulate, these are types of arguing or conversation or discussion or communication with others that we should take into consideration, because Allah Ta'ala gives us in these tools in the Quran to use them. Right? Even Allah Ta'ala, when He gives us ways of reasoning, when He tells us, for example, لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. If there were like two gods, in another verse He said, لذهب كل إله بما خلق ولعلى بعضهم على بعض. If there were two gods, then one God will take what He created, and then there will like war between the two, and one wants to overpower the other. Allah Ta'ala also used reasonings for us to learn. So inshallah ta'ala we'll benefit from the teachings in the Quran to have a better communication with others and to use it in terms of the da'wah and the call people to Allah Azza wa Jal. Barakallahu feekum wa ghafara Allahu lana wa lakum wa jazakum Allah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.